Romeo Devlin, Tom Hitchcock. How are you?
Tom Hitchcock, I'm fantastic. How are you, mate?
Not too bad. I've just, for some reason, and it must be a you thing. You're making me feel like it's Friday. I feel like I should be going for a little drink or something, or you know, um, uh,
Maybe we can have a virtual one later on.
yeah, I reckon it'd be a good call. Get some whiskey out or something. But yeah, happy Wednesday.
Happy
How
Wednesday.
is everything in your world?
Everything's great, mate. Everything's well here. I just got back not long ago, a few weeks back now from a trip around the States and Mexico, over to Utah and Arizona on a bit of a road trip, then down to some of the islands and Mexico City, which was pretty cool. So back into full swing here.
Good. So here for you is Sydney, for those that are watching wherever they are in the world.
Here for me is Sydney. Sydney, born and raised. Spent a bit of time in different parts of the world, but settled back here over on the northern beaches in a little town called Manly, which is by the sea. Used to be a lovely ferry into the CBD, yeah, great little part of the world for those who know it, and those who don't, definitely worth checking out.
And you're in the office now. I can see some well-placed books, which probably leans into what you're probably known for. Is that fair to say?
Yep, yeah, definitely. The last coming on 5 years, I've been at the Entourage. So those who don't know the Entourage, business advisory, coaching, done for professional services. Some of your other speakers you've had on the program have been here over the years. We obviously met with some work we've both done here over the years. And yeah, it's a great place to work. Been enjoying it. We've got a great studio, obviously, set up here. Books behind us from some of the authors within the company, Jack and Tim, elevate up there. But yeah, definitely a place where there's, I guess, lots of education happening, internal, external, being surrounded by education and growth as well, which is, I know a big part of CUSP and what the podcast's all about.
Absolutely, and that's probably been a commonality between each of the conversations we've had for various circumstances. It's not by design. It's just where the conversations end up going, and I suppose anybody listening to any of the episodes will pick those same bits out as well, and they just like that story from going from A to B, But let's talk young Romeo.
Yeah.
Well, I want to know what sort of kid you were.
Mate, great question. I was an only child. I was adopted at birth. So, my parents that I was adopted to on the northern beaches in Sydney, they were a little bit older. I guess by the standards in those days, they were in their 40s when I came along. So I guess a lot of my time was spent without brothers and sisters as an only child in a bit of a creative wonderland, making up games, not so much friends. I didn't have any of the invisible friends. But I would, I guess, get lost in my own world to an extent. I'd watch a lot of TV, read a lot of books. Sometimes people would ask me, do you have an accent? And I think it's probably just growing up watching so much American TV. But yeah, young Romeo was very curious. My mum tells me, my adopted mum, why was one of the first words I started using on repeat. Why? And look. I was very, very curious of the world going on around me, and definitely still am.
Okay. And you're a quiet kid, would you say?
It's interesting. I don't think I was a quiet kid per se. I was probably understimulated in the classroom. I think as a fast learner, I'd take things on in the classroom quite quickly, and then want to move on to what's next. Get a little bit distracted probably, and be a little bit more talkative in class than the teachers liked in 1980s, 1990s, showing my age schools here. But I think outside of class, I found a bit of a refuge. I played a lot of rugby union growing up. Really enjoyed it, the camaraderie of team sports, of having I guess a brotherhood of teammates around me where I didn't have the brothers or sisters to parry about. So I ended up with that naturally, having friends from rugby, friends from school, closer friendships, deeper friendships than maybe breadth in one particular area or group.
Okay. All right. And tell me if I'm out of place asking a personal question. Obviously, you knew you were adopted from a young age.
Yeah.
How did that affect you? Do you think it affected you positively, negatively? Is it shaped any part of your being?
It's a really interesting one. I think a lot of people ask about, when I found out and like how that affected me, and the responses are really mixed, from "oh, I'm sorry" or to "oh, wow, that's really interesting" or "amazing." And it's because I think it's just different to what people know. And I think conversely for me, it was just what I knew. I don't remember a time where I found out. And I guess an interesting story is when my mum brought me home. She obviously hadn't been pregnant, and so they'd been down at the snowfields, got a phone call. They'd been on the waiting list for about 10 years. Unpacked the car, had a note from their neighbour, "please call this number." They called the number, and it was the adoption agency basically saying, "you need to get up here in the next 48 hours to pick up your new son." So they came up, picked me up. Mum pulled into the service station at the time. They had to come out and fill the tank with gas. And the owner of the service station sees a baby in the back and didn't call Crime Watch, but instead says, "oh, you've got an instant baby. You should talk to my mechanic. He also just got an instant baby last week." It was their fun term for an adopted kid. So the mechanic comes out. Basically, they have a chat. He invites mum and her husband over to have some morning tea, meet his wife, meet Mark, who was the other adopted kid that became a friend through even before going to kindy, who was just like me in essence, similar situation, similar, certainly similar neighborhood, and we weren't alone in that. Parents talk. There were other adopted kids. It wasn't a particularly abnormal thing or an unusual thing. There are, I think, 3 that I knew of just in my kindergarten. And we knew we were loved. We knew that we were chosen to be with the families we were with. Whether we might have been accidents, being brought onto the planet, we knew that the place we were was a place filled with, for the most part of it, like in every family, there's ups and downs, but there was love, there was support, and perhaps some opportunities that I mightn't had I been brought up with my mum in the situation she was in at the time.
You know what I like about this, and I'm going to be careful how I word this, is I do find, especially with childhood, there's a lot of things that happen in people's childhood that can be quite colourful. Let's just say that there's events, there's trauma-inducing events in some respects. But I do find with a lot of people, there's a lot of blame on historical events, a lot of finger pointing as to their current behaviour or set of circumstances. And I've had my own stuff as well, and I've always struggled to accept that. I've always struggled to accept it on the basis that that you haven't really processed it. We still have that personal choice and what have you. And I think you sort of resonate that point, if you like, that you have a decision. You can either be something as a reason for some bad decision making, or even a motivation for success.
Yeah,
does that make sense, or am I rambling a bit?
No, it makes sense. I mean, like I touched on, like there's elements of, I think in my instance, there was a lot of love and compassion that I felt and was surrounded by, particularly, with my adopted mom. She was just an absolute martyr. Her mother was raised by nuns, and like that was really instilled. That giving nature was really instilled in her. But conversely, there was, I guess, trauma and things that would happen with, my adopted father as we sort of grew older, and as I grew older and they grew older. Without going, I guess, right into all of that, there's stuff you take that happens and it's not necessarily fantastic. You can either deal with and use as a reason, as you said, to go down to a path. 100%, you can own it, you can spur it. And I think for me, being able to talk about a lot of the stuff that happened, I guess, later on, was me taking back ownership, taking back control of not just a narrative, but literally, what drives me, my own accountability, my own responsibility, and basically saying you can just be a victim to things that you're maybe not so happy about, or aren't fantastic, or you can use them as a springboard for what's next.
Okay, so I've got a question for you then.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you obviously I always like to go back in time to see someone's journey. But why do you think I'll focus on your childhood in this case?
Why do you focus on my childhood in this case? I mean, there could be a bunch of reasons, Tom. Why don't you tell me? I'm not as good as reading minds as you might be.
No reading minds here. But thanks for actually being sincere and giving it a decent crack at trying to see what my thought process was. I see a lot of how you are with the entourage and what you do and how you look at other people's blind spots based on where you've come from. Okay. Yeah. So you look at people's businesses about being a business owner. Okay. That's not the easiest thing to do, because once you're in the club, it's a private club, so you need a certain skill set, which means you need to look at things differently. You need to have that curiosity, as you pulled into earlier in your childhood. And these were the things that I half expected you to say, but I didn't know you were going to say. So do you think a lot of your attributes and what your upbringing has created has really made you sort of the coach, mentor that you are today?
I think what it taught me in the way I grew up, Tom, is pattern matching and recognizing different patterns and being able to be very, very quick on the uptake in different situations, really sponge things in. As an only child, there was not essentially the kids' table, because my adopted parents were in the 40s. Their brothers and sisters had all had kids long before. So by the time I was 5, all of my cousins were, and I didn't have a lot of cousins, but the kids' table were all 15 to 20. Fast track to a few years later again, they're in their 20s and there's babies coming through. I was kind of this in between, so I was always at the either the adults table or being dragged around to the adult conversations. So I kind of had to, I think in those essences, I was never taught to just be quiet and be seen and not heard. I participate, and I think with that, it's like you hear with Alzheimer patients start to recognize facial cues for what they should be responding to. It was probably in essence me doing that. Like I was learning, I guess, a set of social cues and social behaviors that was just a hothouse environment, and that skill set stayed with me. It's it's an area wherever I've moved in business and life. I've talked about it like seeing around corners. I know with some of the things you like to do with blindfolds and seeing. It's maybe not too dissimilar. I don't know how you give that. I know you talk about that in some of the other episodes. But for me, being able to predict or see what's going to transpire is to a degree experience in some regards. My own experience, it is understanding other experiences that I've read about, related to, gone through with people, that I can put together all of the sum parts and then say, okay, well, I know from that this is a likely and predicted outcome. Here's what we should do about it. Here's some things to consider. Here's some things that maybe we don't have a crystal ball, but if we did, it might look like.
So it sounds a bit like you're coming away from creative Romeo over into analytical, which is essentially left brain, right brain,
Yeah.
in many terms. I have you down as an analytical person. That's definitely something you've got on me, significantly. And that's probably what works well when you are speaking with business owners. Now, talking on the present, we're speaking with business owners. You've spoken to probably businesses of various shapes and sizes, but across different sectors, which is really important because there's a lot of subject matter experts that just know banking or just whatever. To be agnostic across gives you the rich data. Okay. From what you've seen of people doing right and wrong, what would be your key advice you give to anybody who's either just looking to start up a business or has started up a business in that early stage spot?
Early stage businesses, that tend to be, I mean, everyone will tell you there's so much about, just getting sales and runs on the board and failing fast, which is definitely important. But there's definitely steps to go through. And it's whether someone's starting up a business or just started up that business, making sure that, I guess, not too many steps are like skipped over is probably the key thing, because there's a million things to do running a business, and that's a given. And there's a million different distractions, and there's a million different opinions and podcasts and books and friends at barbecues telling people what to do. But a lot haven't necessarily done it, and a lot haven't got the breadth of experience of seeing it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and seeing, in essence, what are the things that you can push off to the side and get distracted by otherwise? What are the things that you really need to focus on? And then what are the actual best next steps or the priorities that need to happen? And if I was to outline them in a couple of key orders, product to market fit and getting that fail fast mentality and working out what your product actually is really on is super, super important. It's a conversation I've had with someone only recently. They've got a great product without going right into what it is. It's a disruptive product. In essence, the technology underpinning the product that they want to deliver is secondary to the product that they're trying to make as a service. My suggestion's been get that service, forget the tech for a second, just prove that concept works, that people want this, then you can get the tech underpinning it, and all of the development and the money that you're going to put into that, that you're going to provide just a better way of doing things once you do it. But there's hesitation because there's so many shiny objects out there that, in that case, that can be something to, I guess, self-sabotage. You'd see it all the time. Self-sabotage is, a very, very easy thing to do, which is the challenge sometimes with mentoring and coaching. The old adage of you can lead a horse to water. As soon as you start presenting an idea or solutions or steps, it's very easy for people to take that advice and make that fail. Whereas, coaching someone into an actual decision of their own that they've got buy-in in, they're actually understanding why, and then choosing that as an option can definitely allow them to take courage of making something succeed instead of sabotage.
And that's the skill, isn't it? Is to make sure the same thing goes with parenting. If the child thinks it's their idea, then they're fully invested. And you need to cultivate that environment. And if you can do that with the coaching, so it's not just do this, do that, and you'll be successful. It isn't. It's to get the ideas coming out of their mind. It's empowering. Realize actually they already know it all. We just need to extract it, validate it, implement it next. That's what's been my experience based on what you're saying there.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of it too, Tom. A lot of people get strategic and creative, and then don't sort of consider what that actually translates to in implementable steps or those analytical steps. And I know you sort of touched on that I'm maybe more analytical. I think I really balance both. I think I was very creative growing up, but I actually built in an analytical side to me because it just creates success. I think it was Jocko Willink, read Extreme Ownership, and he talks about discipline equaling freedom. He talks about from a military and a leadership perspective and personal accountability. But it's true of running a business or of executing any plan. there needs to be some, I call it gravity and levity. So the levity essentially being that, that trajectory that we're trying to, achieve towards, the gravity being what are the actual resources, what's the actual runway look like? Because if we don't know what the runway is and we don't know the altitude we're trying to get to, we actually don't know how far. It's like, when we talk about North Stars and roadmaps and all these sorts of analogies, whenever you've got a start point and or a destination rather, you need to know that start point. If you don't know the start point, you don't know how far you're going to be, of course, no matter where the destination is. We might be there.
Yeah, and it's establishing those measurables and accountability, making sure they're realistic as well, and factoring in the curveballs, like you say, fail as fast as possible.
Yeah,
and that as well. Okay, all right. So, sort of keep this going in a certain trajectory. And a word I can never say correctly. Okay, so one of the ones that highlighted a list, but I just did it to myself. That's why I thought it was Friday. What's next for Romeo? Okay, where do let's fast forward 5 years, let's say. So let's get, you say we're at your start point now, okay, and 5 years is your roadmap, your runway, if you like, and your North Star. So using your own terminology back at you, and this isn't for accountability. I'm just interested to see with this wonderful experience you got, what you're going to do with it next.
Yeah, good. It's a great question. I think, and travel's a great time to take a sit back and look at the world and your place in it, and work out how you're contributing, what you want to contribute, and do more of, less of. I think over the next 5 years, as it has been for the past few years as well, families becoming a really relevant thing for me, and how that change shapes and grows. I think with that contribution and how you can make a greater contribution and a legacy starts to become a factor. I think from that side with me, a little bit will become full circle. It'll be looking at how I can harness more creativity, and use the lessons I've learned and what I've built on to give back through some of that creativity. I love structure. I love simplicity. Simplicity is one of my core values, but I'm a big believer that simplicity often takes a lot of hard work and a lot of behind the scenes and a lot of designs to be truly, truly beautiful. And I think that's where creativity also comes into that. So that's part of the process and part of the journey. I think over the next 5 years is looking at how I use creativity, how I use simplicity, how I use structure and planning, and start to synthesize that into doing what I'm doing now in some way, shape, or form, and more, and how I managed to do that and juggle it, ticking all my I guess my personal milestones and boxes, which I've always got a million and one things, or one or two big things usually running on the side.
Yeah, brilliant. And you know what I do like about that is the complexity behind simplicity, because that's misunderstood. And I remember when the iPhone first came out, and everyone was amazed that it had one button that could do so much. How's it even possible?
Yeah.
And it's that simple a thing to use that kids can use it, and they're very good at it. But obviously, when it was the late Steve Jobs to turn around and said, well, actually, it's more complex than anything we've ever created before. You just don't see it. We've just made it simple for you.
Yeah.
And I think that really hits home that point that you're making on simplicity as a virtue, and to arrive at that point, it's complex.
Yeah, it definitely can be. I mean, you look at nature. This is something when I was in America, some of the most beautiful, simple seeming objects around. You stand there in awe, but as you start to look at it or understand how they came to be, it's in some ways simple, but how long have you got? You start to unpack what's actually transpired, and the eons and eons that that objects have had to traverse to be in that place they are, that shape, that form that they are. There's nothing simple about it. And I think that's overlooked. The beauty and the simplicity of nature is anything but.
That's the thing with nature. There's lots of lessons there. We just need to start looking. I remember I mentioned recently that back in the day when we didn't have street lights, if you like, so just the light pollution that's out there. The television, the Netflix of our ancestors with the skies. Yeah. And they would sit there and they would stargaze, they would study, they would learn, they'd pick the patterns, and they had the best show on earth. Yeah. And now we've essentially dumbed ourselves down by looking down because we've blocked all that off,
Yeah.
Anyhow, all right. Listen, I'm going to wrap this up now. It's been a lovely conversation. It's nice. It's nice to hear a little bit about mini Romeo. If someone likes what you've spoken about and wants to reach out, maybe do some business coaching with you or anything similar to that, how would be the best way for them to contact you?
Easiest way is just track me down on LinkedIn. As far as I know, there's only one, Romeo Devlin. Reach out. We can find the best way, shape, or form to connect from there. I'm always happy, whether it's having a virtual whiskey or to have a virtual coffee, and hear about people's stories. I'm very much, I think, like you in that way, Tom. I think the connections we make, whether we're the best person to help someone through having a chat, through working together, or connecting other people, the collective strength of our network around us and our experience is what makes us all the more stronger, not just who we are and what we know.
Simplicity. Fantastic. Listen, thanks a lot for your time. I do appreciate it, and I look forward to our virtual whiskey.
Thanks, Tom. Or even better, a real one soon.
Yeah, done. Have a good one.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Thank you for watching this episode. I hope that you did enjoy it, had lots of takeaways from it. As before, please subscribe below so you can keep on top of any new releases we have. And also, if you would like to have your story told, just reach out with me and I'd love to give you that platform. My best email address is tom@purplepatchconsulting.com. Thank you.